the valley was gone. We feel just as heavy as lead, but we never get up to the clouds and bring the breakfast up to bed.
Hello and welcome to episode 14 of God's Own Scale podcast, your one-stop podcast for 6mm wargaming and smaller. Hope you're well. I hope you're keeping safe in these strange times that we're living in. This episode sees me speaking to Andy Kirk from Heroics and Ros. Now, anybody who knows anything about 6mm or 1/300th scale gaming can't fail to be aware of Heroics and Ros. They are one of the oldest manufacturers of that scale in existence. Andy Kirk was a gracious guest, giving up some of his time to come and talk to me about the history of Heroics and Ros and where the company is now and hopefully where it's going to. It's a really interesting chat and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it too. Before we go on to the interview, one or two bits of news and a couple of shout outs. So it looks like the show scene for 2020 is pretty much cancelled now with the announcement that Warfare in Newbury Reading is cancelled until next year. It's not a surprise. I think that is probably the last of the big shows to be cancelled now. There might be one or two smaller local shows. I know there's Wargamer in Birmingham, which takes place in December. Usually there's no word on that yet. And I think the show in Sittingbourne, as far as I'm aware, has not been cancelled yet, but obviously check out the usual hobby news websites for updates on that. Bacchus opened and then very quickly shut again their shopping cart. I think it was just over 24 hours that it was open. Everybody was given fair warning of its opening, and I know that Peter was once again inundated with orders throughout that 24-hour period. I've certainly put my order in for Zulus and American War of Independence. More of that in a future show, I'm sure. I want to give a shout out to Andy, who has set up firepowergaming.com. This promises to be a web store with a difference, being a one-stop shop for all of your hobby needs. Andy contacted me over Twitter, where he can be found at dice_dad, or indeed Firepower Gaming, which is at FP Gaming UK, and the website firepowergaming.com. He's just setting up the web store, and there's nothing on there yet to purchase, but certainly one or two blog entries. He's asked for clubs to send in details of their whereabouts and their activities, so there can be a hub for people looking for a local Wargames club to attend. I've just submitted the details for Stoke Wargames group, which hopefully will be up on the website now. There's also an excellent blog by @Joe_Wargamer discussing how he produces and weathers and modifies MDF building kits, which is really outstanding. I suggest you take a look at that and see some of his work because it's beautiful. @Joe_Wargaming is his Twitter handle, so easily found on Twitter if you use that social media platform. Other news is, I was trying to find details of this, but I'm just struggling over the web, but I know that it's been talked about that Partisan, or the other Partisan, has obviously been cancelled, but similar to what they did in May with the first Partisan, there looks to be an intention to run a virtual Partisan on the 11th of October. So a Partisan in the cloud, and I know that previous guest of the show, Henry Hyde, did an excellent talk on his sitting bag game, and I think it was Molowitz. I think he talked for about 3 hours on that particular piece to contribute towards Partisan in the Cloud. So it'll be worth watching out for and checking out the usual websites for that as well. Now, Wargaming news is found all over the internet, but I'm going to give a shout out now to a website that I highly recommend and gets the God's Own Scale seal of approval for all wargaming news and reviews and discussions about the latest out there. There's also a forum attached to the website, and that it is called the wargameswebsite.com. It's a relatively new venture, sort of along the lines of the miniatures page. I suggest you check it out and have a look. All the latest hobby news is on there, as I say, along with a active forum where you can join and discuss your particular projects. Blog of the episode, and I probably should have chosen this as the first blog of the episode, having spoken to John at Heretical Gaming. Or having said that, the blog that I chose, as in Big Lee's blog, was a very worthy addition. But the blog for this week is Heretical Gaming blogspot.com. It is John's home for his gaming activities. He's just started the Gallic Wars campaign. There's an English Civil War campaign on there that he's fought out. There's the Peninsular War campaign he's fought out. And there's lots of interesting other bits and pieces that he talks about. Lots and lots of battle reports, which are excellent to read. So please get over there and support John in his efforts at hereticalgamingblogspot.com. Salute next year is looking to run on April the 10th, 2021 at the Excel Centre as usual. Now, with easing of lockdown and the apparent development of vaccines, then I don't think it's beyond the realms of a possibility that Salute will go ahead next year. I'll certainly be planning on attending and hopefully doing some roving reporting, but more of that at the end of the show. But I will be attending in my guise as God's Own Scale roving reporter to have a look what's going on at the largest one-day wargame show in the country and probably in Europe. I don't know if it's bigger than Crisis or not, but it's certainly up there as one of the biggest. Everybody who's listening to this will be familiar, of course, with Salute. And finally, another small item to discuss. I'm going to be discussing a range of the episode in 6mm. And this one may take a few people by surprise because I am primarily a historical gamer in 6mm and 15mm actually, but primarily in 6mm. But I'm going to point you towards Irregular Miniatures 6mm fantasy range. Now, the reason I'm choosing this as the range of the episode is because in their news section on the website, irregularminiatures.co.uk, there's a picture of a horde of orc infantry that they've recently posted. And it really is splendid, and it shows off the advantages of 6mm and fantasy gaming in that it is a real horde of greenskins charging towards the camera. I think it's a fabulous picture. Irregular Miniatures paint up lovely. I know that some of the sculpts are very old now, actually. This range has been in existence for some time, but they do what they say on the tin, and there is a fantastic range. And one of the advantages of playing fantasy in 6mm is, of course, certainly for the human type elements, you can use pretty much any historical range that you choose to represent the humans. And then you can also use 10, 15 or even 28mm figures to act as the larger creatures, albeit Irregular do produce dragons and ogres and giants and all those sort of things. So whether you want to play the Battle of Helm's Deep or the Pelennor Fields battle from the Lord of the Rings, or you want to play Kings of War in 6mm, and I know a friend of the show, Steve Evans, hi Steve, has collected several 6mm armies to play Kings of War with using Irregular Miniatures. And I'm really looking forward to seeing those in the flesh and having a game with Steve at some point in the near future. It is a cheap and easy way of getting into games like Kings of War, and in fact can turn into a travel version of it. So if you travel a lot on work or for business, or even going on holiday, then you could almost take a collection with you in a very small box, actually. So check them out if 6mm Fantasy floats your boat as the next project or side project that you choose. And that's at irregularminiatures.co.uk. Even just check out that picture that I'm talking about that's gone up on their news section. And I do hope to speak to Ian in the very near future. I'm going to reach out to him again. I did reach out to him when I first launched the podcast, and he was certainly interested in coming on and talking to me. And I'm trying to do that with every manufacturer of 6mm that there is at the moment. Scheduling can be a small problem occasionally. My work hours are pretty varied and unpredictable at times, but I certainly hope that Ian will be appearing on the show very soon. Okay, that is enough of me wittering on. I've wittered on for a few more minutes than perhaps I intended, and I think that might become a feature as we move forward with this podcast. So please forgive me. I'm now going to hand over to the interview where I speak to Andy Kirk from Heroics and Ros. So for now, let's talk about 6.
Mademoiselle from Armand, same to you. Sing it with all your heart and soul and see everyone right up the pole. Mademoiselle from Armand.
Yeah. So thanks for your time, mate. Very good.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Perfect. Fine. Okay, go for it.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Welcome then to episode 14 of God's Own Scale. I've got a really special guest with me today. I'm aiming to reach out to as many manufacturers and producers in the hobby as I can. And I've managed to track one down to DP Stark, East Hampshire, I think it is. Is that right, Andy?
It is indeed, yes.
That voice is Mr. Andy Kirk of Heroics and Ros. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, glad to be here, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Well, as we've discussed in the bit of a pre-ramble, I think it's you're breaking your virginity with podcasting.
Absolutely. I've never done anything quite like this before in my life. So.
Well, I like to tread new ground on this podcast. And I'm glad to hear it because you are owner, proprietor of Heroics and Ros, which is a name that goes back into the history of wargaming some time, doesn't it? It
does. I believe late 1960s was Navwar was the company that sort of there's been lots of trails of companies and ranges and bits and pieces, but Navwar was established in mid to late 1960s, and so it's got a very, very long history. And some of the Heroics and Ros stuff that I've found in the great clear out that probably everyone's been doing in the pandemic is I found molds from the early 1980s and late 70s. So yes. It's got a long history, that's for sure. Yeah.
Well, I remember looking at a Heroics and Ros advert in probably military modelling in the very early 80s, I would suggest, and just being overwhelmed by this page of text with some odd letter and number combinations to describe German tanks, like PZ111J or whatever. There probably isn't a Panzer 3J, I don't know, but seeing these strange names like Ferdinand and Panther and thinking, my goodness, there's little models of all of these little things. I have no idea what they are because, of course, that was pre-internet, so it was very difficult to get hold of a picture of a Panzer 3, whatever. But it's the wide range of models, not only going back to biblical times and throughout history, but that advert really sticks with me from my childhood.
I think it's the big strength of Heroics and Ros is just how big the range is. It's to be honest, sometimes I sit there and think, why did they make that? Or some things you sell, there literally are figure packs. I've owned the company for 10 years. that we in that 10 years, I'm still using the stock of the figures we had when I bought the company. So, and others, we just cannot keep enough figures in stock. You just literally just cast because they just sell. That's what it's such a and actually it creates its own problems, because I'm sitting there thinking, well, what new stuff do we make, particularly with World War II? It's like anything now is really, 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 really obscure. So it's one of the reasons I started a project to go back over things and go, okay, some of these designs are, there's nothing wrong with them at the time, but they could be 30-40-year-old design, and we can do better now. So it's a gradual process of upgrading things,
Sure.
which I always shied away from, because I wanted to bring new things out, and none of them are bad. And it's almost like, well, do you want something new, or do you want something that's a redo? And I'm always trying to balance between the two, which is the right way forward. So
yeah, I'm sure. That must be a difficult decision sometimes, because you've only got so much time.
It's almost like a gamble every time, because you've only got so much money, I suppose, to invest in new stuff, but also it's not just the money, it's the sculpting time, and it really is. If you do one, you're not doing something else. So it's and just because 6 people have emailed you to tell you they're going to buy X, there might be 100 people that haven't emailed you that's going to buy Y. One of the first things I commissioned was by mistake. We were chatting with the sculptor and going, what can we, what information do you need? How do you want to work, and all the rest of it? And I sent him two lots of information that were completely different. One was a magazine article on a Swedish artillery piece, a modern piece based on an articulated lorry, and one was a proper engineering drawing of a Austrian truck. And he made both for me, and I'm like, I didn't actually really mean to make them. I was just trying to clarify which sort of information was the best way of getting the information. He's like, well, I can work from both. We do them, and they both turned out to be really good sellers. And it's like, I would not have predicted, a Swedish articulated self-propelled gun that I think there's only 24 of in the world. It gets bought so much. But
really?
I had someone in Taiwan buy more than there are in the world. And so I emailed them and asked them what they're doing with them, and there's a science fiction project. I'm like, okay, fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, I hadn't even thought of that. So
yeah, interesting. That's fascinating, isn't it? That as I say, I was bamboozled by the names of some of these vehicles, and there's the World War II and the modern listings on that advert usually, and I became fascinated with it. I've never been a tanky. I've never been into, I've played a lot of World War II, but it's never been a major project of mine. But it's always fascinated me, the wide variety of vehicles, and like you say, there must be codes within that list that have only ever sold a handful throughout the history of Heroics and Ros, and there must be others that sell thousands upon thousands.
Yes, there are. You've got a little flame-throwing tank, and it's like it's been done to complete. I suppose this is what I always liked about 6mm. I became fascinated by a scale, because to me it was almost a perfect balance between the models were big enough that you could actually see the difference, and you knew just by looking at it what it was. But the cost meant you could actually make some of this weird things and actually sell them at a sensible price. And to me it was like, and if you wanted to have a big battle, you want lots of T-34s, because there were lots of T-34s. So you don't want one representing 20, you want to be able to put 20 on there. I mean,
yes,
and that's or at least 5 or 6, and not break the bank. And to me it was always a balancing act between, it was an affordable way of joining it. I started by buying the models. That's how I got into it. I like the models, I like painting them. I could collect lots of them and not use a huge amount of space and upset everyone that my model collection was now, taking over rooms, houses, and all the rest of it. So, And that's the thing that I found fascinating. And my dad was in the war, and he was always interested in military stuff. And when I bought the company and I showed him the models, he was looking at them and going, "Oh, that's a so and so, and that's a so and so." And I thought,
Really?
this guy is 80 years old and he's looking at them, and he clearly had a very good reason to recognise what a German tank looked like.
Yeah.
But he goes, "Oh yeah." And and I'm like, "Oh," and he's like, he's just, and it was just I just sat there and thought, yeah, it's, where else can you, what other scale could you, I mean, I'm sure you can, but we've got a little range of Australian carriers that's 4 or 5 of them that we sell once in a blue moon. But it means if you want to do the Australians, you can have their carriers. So
Yes.
to me, that's what I liked about it. I come from the other end. More modern it is, probably the more I like it. And
Yeah.
I struggle with Waterloo and the 7 Years' War and things like that because I just don't have the knowledge so much there. And it's. And also, I sit there and I think, there's so many. Whoever the sculptors before knew those ranges very well, and they've done hordes of things. So I sat there and almost thought they didn't do the other end, so I'm doing the other end now. But then want to come back and start looking at bits and pieces that are missing. So
yes,
it's interesting.
I think I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That one of the big advantages of 1/300th or 6 mil is that producing those really obscure vehicles isn't like Warlord games do in 28 mil, where they have to commission a plastic model and get the plastic molding done, which I'm told one plastic mold costs something like £10,000 or something ridiculous.
We've looked at whether it would make economic sense to put something like a Sherman or a T-34 in, injection mold it, and for us it doesn't. It just, even with selling the large quantities we do of those particular tanks, it because you get a lot in one go, so you end up holding a lot of stock, and it's like and no, it doesn't. For them, I can see it's horses for courses, and there are lots of manufacturing changes taking place now, and it's really interesting to look at, maybe we could do that, or maybe some doors are opening that weren't open before. So that's one of the things I'm enjoying about the company now, that we're looking at how to make masters, how production techniques that technology doesn't sit still. So it's even the mold, even the rubbers that the molds are made out of changed, which means now you can put more detail onto something and not destroy the mold on the first run. So we can do things that we couldn't do 20-30 years ago. So it's good.
It's evolving.
I think it's very much evolving. 3D printing's coming along, and we're using that to make masters now, and that's opening a lot of doors to us. Whereas before, you had to, we did do a sort of make a base model and then modify it each time to get the variants, but that was quite time consuming, and sometimes we actually made parts, so we'd have the track sections we knew would be on 20 different models, so actually they just sculpt the track sections and cast the track sections, and then they can add them to the model. But now we can make a model and make 20 variants of the Sherman relatively easily, and say, okay, well, now we can do this obscure version that we didn't do before, or if you want the Indo-Pakistan variant of it with something hanging off the back, then we can do that too. So that's what I found. That's quite good. So hopefully that will bear some fruit. A bit more experimenting to go, but I'm an engineer by training, and that's what I think that's what I find most fascinating about the whole manufacturing process and things like that.
I'd like to get into the actual sort of day-to-day running of hobby business shortly, and the actual process of pouring that lead in and then getting it into the hands of
Or
your
don't call it
customers.
lead. You couldn't get it.
Alloy. I don't know what it
White
is.
metal alloy, whatever you want to.
Right.
I mean, it's everything. So yes, yeah.
I've got a very significant birthday coming up in about 3 weeks, so I'm of the older generation that will have probably got a significant amount of lead in my body at the moment.
I'm older than you, so
Right.
it's just the every now and again you get someone like, oh, is it all made of lead? And you're like, no. The days of they were solid lead lumps. They are not solid lead lumps. Yes, some of the metals we use do have a bit of lead in because it gives the right flow properties, and some don't. And but the people taking the risk, if we didn't give them the right ventilation bits and pieces, would be the people doing the casting, not the people playing with the models. So
okay, excellent.
It's good.
Yeah. Let's just wind it back a bit then, Andy.
Yeah.
So how did you become involved in Heroics and Ros from a business perspective?
Quite literally an accident. I've always been interested in military models, modelling, doing things like this, and I had a snowboarding accident and ripped the ligaments off my thumb, and I ended up in a cast from the end of my fingers to the top of my shoulder for 3 months. I couldn't move my arm and was sitting at home getting very, very bored and couldn't do anything, couldn't work, couldn't do anything, and thought I've got to get back into a hobby. And I'd liked military, and I'd collected all sorts of scales of models and things like that. And I found some 6mm models and from all the manufacturers, and I just started collecting them. And when they took the cast off, I couldn't move my hand, and they said, you need to do painting. It's the best thing. Don't use a pen because that'll hurt your hand. And I think they meant painting pictures, but I was of the opinion that I wasn't going to do that. So I started painting models, and I just ended up buying more and more and more of them. And luckily they were small because I was living with the girlfriend, well, now wife's parents at the time, because I only really had one useful arm. And the collection just got bigger and bigger. And I got her to drive me up to the little shop in Ilford and go and see Tony on a Saturday and buy a few things and come back. And, one thing led to another, really. They say, I like the model so much I bought the company. So, yes, it was, I thought Heroics and Ros just, to me, was a really underexposed range of models, and it had so much. I just couldn't believe when I got there what you could get, from everything. I wanted to make complete units of, I wanted the engineering kit, I wanted the bridging kit, I wanted all the bits and pieces, and they had it. And it was like, oh, can I do that, can I do this? And they sold the models by the one, and it was like, so I don't have to buy 5-10 of these things. I only want to. No, you just, I'm like, okay. I mean, when I saw his stock control, you think, oh yeah, I can see it. Trust me, that's one of the, I can see why companies sell them by the 5, shall we say. Right. But it was great. So, and I said I thought, well, okay, what I'll do is I'll become a distributor for you. And Tony, bless him, was like, no, I like the way the company's run. If you want to run it differently, you can buy the company. So I thought, okay. And my mother had just died and left me some money, and I chatted to the girlfriend, and should I do this? And she's like, well, what would you do if someone else did it and made a success of it? And I said, I'd be really upset because I think I can do something with this. And she said, well, in that case, you better go away and buy it then, hadn't you? So I chatted to Tony, we had lots of conversations about it, and I ended up buying the whole company. And then bringing it back to the house. So,
was it like was it just like turning up in a van then and throwing?
No, a very big lorry. There are thousands. I have some friends who own a transport company, so I spoke nicely to them and got one of their 18-ton lorries with big tail lifts, and And when it turned, I didn't really quite realise how big it was going to be, shall we say, because there are literally thousands of moulds, thousands and thousands. And it was like, luckily I got the racking with it. So it's like, right, this is going to take me, it took me probably weeks to put all the moulds back up and get everything in position. And that was, I just sort of thought, what have you done now?
Yeah, I'm sure it's like, what on earth do I do now?
It was like, I was quite lucky because, I had big garage. I put it in the garage and down the side of the house, and I started making bits and pieces. And because all his sales had been by fax and letter, that meant, it was relatively slow. But as we became sort of we start to get more of a web presence, started to do emails and things like that. Obviously, the order starts to build up, and gradually it builds and builds and builds, and it's like this is getting busier and busier and busier. And I've got a full-time job as well, so yeah, it was it went through an interesting stage until we got moved to some premises and got someone else to do some casting as well. And it's like it's the company's grown, over the time that I've owned it. I think it's probably nearly 4 times the size that I bought it. So,
Wow.
It certainly there is, it's good, but as you grow, it brings its own problems. It's you haven't got enough pictures of the images on your website, and you're like, yes, I know, but I'm not starting from scratch. And it's like it's there's so much more I want to do with it, and I'm sort of like think, well, which bit do I do first? It's certainly an interesting job, that's for sure.
That's one word to describe it. So when you bought the company, did you go through a sort of training program with Tony?
Tony was really good. We went up there, and I was really, I'm an engineer. I was interested in manufacturing techniques. I'd actually been to one of Bacchus's open days and seen how they made things there, and I thought, this is quite doable. And then I went to Tony, and he said, well, clearly if you're thinking of buying the company, you need to be able to manufacture all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah. So I went to work for him. Well, not work, did work for him for on a Saturday, and thought, yep, I can do this. And casting is definitely a bit of a black art. It's, and I think either you've got the knack for it or you haven't. Luckily enough, I have. So it's sort of, he's like, oh no, you can do this. He's like, yeah. He said some people, could almost, because some other people had looked at buying it, and he'd done exactly the same thing with them. And he was like, my advice to you is don't buy it because you won't be able to do it. And he's like, within the first day, he's like, no, clearly, obviously we need some more experience and stuff like this. But he was so supportive. Even after I bought it, I ran into some problems, and I'd ring him up and like, oh, so you could try this or do that. And a couple of times I couldn't do something with a mold. And he said, well, bring it up. And I'd come up on a Saturday, go in his back room, because he's still got his naval range, and he'd show me, oh no, you need to do a bit this, or the temperature a bit higher or a bit faster, or simple things you didn't even dawn of, like you can turn the machine to run backwards. And I'm like, I didn't even think of that, and it's just experience, and there isn't any real substitute for that, but clearly some people pick it up quicker and easier than others. So but he I have to say, the purchase of Heroics and Ros from Tony was really brilliant. He was really helpful, really supportive, and I think because it's been his baby, he'd nurtured it from its birth, and was very anxious that it went to someone who was going to look after it, and hopefully I have. So
what was Tony's surname? I'm not familiar.
Anderson. Tony Anderson.
Right, okay. So, and did he start the range off?
No, well, there's another person called Roger Stiles, and he's the original sculptor, I think, which is where the Ros comes from for Heroics and Ros. So it's right. Roger, a middle initial that I don't know, Stiles.
Yeah.
But I've never met Roger. Him and Tony had some sort of partnership relationship where they were both selling the same product, and I'm not sure how it all got funded and that sort of stuff. And it's not the sort of thing that you ask, but I think mostly Roger did the sculpting and Tony did the manufacturing, marketing, that sort of stuff. And between the two of them, they had 2 outlets for it. And then Roger decided he wasn't going to do it anymore, and Tony took on all of the Roger side of the business as well. So and that's what I and Tony wanted to keep it going, but I think as you get older, you sort of look at where do you want to go with the business, and from his point of view, he had it exactly where he wanted it to. He didn't want to expand it anymore. He was it was providing the income that he needed versus the work that he wanted to put into it, and he was very happy with that sort of status. Whereas I was like, well, but why haven't you got this in the range, or why haven't you got that in the range? And that's we could do with one of those. And he's like, yeah, I know, but I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah. So that's eventually how I ended up buying it, because I thought I want the same reason I bought Armstrong Model, I suppose. It's like I wanted to do the 21st Panzer, and I'm like, I want you to make this, and I want you to make that, and it's sort of like, well, okay, but I haven't got the time because I'm casting all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, well, if we take over casting and selling and all the rest of it, you can do more sculpting. So it's been an organic growing process, really.
Sure. So what year did you buy the company?
I bought it in December 2009. So yeah, bought it in December 2009, and yeah, got it. We had made our first sale on Christmas Eve under my ownership. So yes.
Wow. That's something to think about, isn't it? Your
Yeah, I
first
kept the
sale.
order. I kept the order just
Yeah.
as like because it came in the post, and there's like, and some it was a guy called Mark Beavis who and he sent me a little letter saying, best wishes, brother. Here's a little order just to be your first one. And I'm like, I obviously didn't know it would be the first one, but he obviously put it in pretty quick, and there it was. Yeah, order number one. So.
And what was that for? Sherman tanks. Got
I can't actually remember without looking it out. I just kept it in the file. Like now, I should have looked it out, but no, I don't remember.
No,
it was certainly World War II. Certainly World War II.
Right.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fantastic. So those early days, then, I guess it was a case cataloguing everything that you got. If you got an 18-ton truck and it's full of stuff, that must have been almost overwhelming to think, where do I start?
When we put the pallets out, I just looked at it and I thought, oh.
What have I done?
Yes, literally, I thought, oh, what have I done?
Yeah.
Because clearly, before you could make anything, you had to get all the pallet, all the molds in. All the molds are numbered. So if I know that code A2 equals mold 15, and so I go to code A2, pull out mold 15, I can make it. And but in the transport of the molds, some of them had moved, and when I say some, I mean quite a lot. So and so you opened the lorry up, and we went, oh, okay. So all the lads put the molds back on pallets, but clearly not on all the right pallets, you know.
Yeah.
So with the best will in the world, we started off with what we thought was a system, and then we didn't have a system anymore. So it was like, okay, what's that, you know? And yes, so it was a big job to get those all aligned, and then to put, I lived on. In my own at the time then, and we didn't have any kids, so it was like, okay, I'll make one of the bedrooms the storeroom for Heroics and Ros stuff, and it's like, well, okay, there's a whole wall there that's now racked out with the figures, so you know, so we could actually find things. So it was, yeah, it was a big job, and then I thought, well, okay, I'll get the website working, and he's got quite a nice website, but it just doesn't, you can't buy anything, won't be a problem. And then after about 2 months of trying to make this thing work, we couldn't get it to work properly, so we had to start again from scratch. And it's like, oh, okay, fine. No, yeah. Right, now we've got to build a website. So, yeah.
It's suddenly a web developer.
Luckily, I'd done a bit of that, but not enough to do an e-cart. So I made a very simple site that at least told you where to email, that we took PayPal and, things like that. And gradually, the hobby's 6 mils small, really... wargaming small, and 6 mils a small part of that, and it's trying to reach all these people, hence one of the nice reasons for doing this. It's like, we are out there. I started going to shows and people will go, oh, we remember you, but we thought you didn't exist anymore. I'm like, no, we are still here, and we're still doing our bits and pieces.
Just on that bit about when people were starting to see you at shows and say I didn't realise you were still around. I remember seeing you at Colours a few years ago. I'm pretty sure it's the first time I'd ever seen Heroics and Ros at a show. I'm more in the North Midlands, I guess, so I don't often get down to the southern shows. But seeing Heroics and Ros actually in the flesh at a show was a big thing for me. And I think I bought a few bits and pieces at the time.
Well, thank you.
Not at all. I've very much enjoyed the product, but... was that a conscious decision for you then to get out to the show?
It's a balancing act.
Because it is that shop window, isn't it?
It's for me, when I was doing a real job, for that word, and owning Heroics and Ros, the problem was mostly I would cash up with all the orders and all the work at the weekend. So literally, I'd work the weekend and the real job, work a lot of the weekend. And I, a public thank you to my girlfriend stroke wife now for help letting me do that, and just to keep up with things. So every a show is an awful lot of work. Even if it's just a 1-day show, you can spend probably the week before sort of getting rid of it, ready for it, and then the week after sort of tidying up after it. So, and also if I then was actually at the show at the weekend, I wasn't doing any work. So. And then you put travel in, and you think, well, and I sort of looked at the shows and I thought, really, we should do Salute, because just because it's Salute. Actually, it has some huge advantages. You can actually drive to the stand and take your stuff out and all the rest of it, and that's brilliant. But it's a big, it's a big beast, and it's expensive. But let's do it. And then we did it, and it was a really good way to see customers, because the problem is we get too busy, to be honest. But actually, sometimes near the end of the day, or you can actually start to speak to customers, and that's the bit I really like. What are we doing well? What are we doing badly? What could we do better? You get some ideas. Also, you get customer feedback, and you raise the profile of it. And I've always looked at shows less as a revenue generator and more as an as advertising.
Yeah.
But once you fall out of the show circuit, it's not always so easy to get back into it, because the good shows are normally well attended by the traders, so you can't. It's not like there's lots of empty spaces. So then there are two shows near to where we are, the Colours show and the Warfare show, Reading and Newbury. So I thought, well, they're so close, I can actually drive from my house to both shows easily. So we should try and do those. Eventually got in there, and then Peter started organising the Joy of Six show, and he invited us along, and I was like, okay, what is it? Is it a backer show or is it a 6 mil show? And he said, no, I want it to be a 6 mil show. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Then in that case, I'll come along. And we came along, and it was brilliant. Pete has done a lot. Has done a lot to keep 6 mil going, I think.
Yes.
And it was a really good show. We did, we met a lot of our customers there, and apart from I think one year when we've gone every year except when one I was ill and one my wife was ill. So we've we would have been there this year, and we'll be there again next year. We are bad about going to northern shows, to be honest, but Triple's disappeared. It was one we were looking at doing. Other than that, we do get invitations to do some others. I quite like to do one more northern show, but clearly I don't know what actually is going to happen to the show circuit now. It's the pandemic's. It will be interesting to see what happens, to be honest. So that'll be something for next year, and look at what we should do. Because I do feel a bit guilty. We only do the Joy of Six, but it's finding that other show and going to Scotland. That would take that really would be a week of out of the business, and it's like, can I justify that or not? I'm not sure, So it's a difficult decision.
It's interesting, isn't it, with the pandemic? And I'm talking about shows, and I'm suddenly getting that nostalgic feeling for them, because they seem like a lifetime ago now. That
absolutely.
I went to show. I probably go to half a dozen through the year. I used to go to everyone I could find, to be honest, back in the day.
So did I. I loved them.
Yeah.
I used to just go to the Hexagon when the Reading show was there, and I just found them so eye-opening. Even things you weren't particularly interested in, you thought, oh, that's interesting, or I like the way they've done that scenery, I could do that here, or or a new product that you'd never even heard of, or some vehicles. I go, oh, I didn't know that. And just people, just the whole aspect of it, I found. That's one of the downsides actually being a trader at a show. You don't get to, walk around so much. It's like,
but people will come to you, won't they? And they'll talk. And I know I've spoken to Peter numerous times about this, but it's his opportunity to evangelize about the hobby.
Absolutely.
And it's more, as opposed to, of course, you want to make some money, but that's not the prime purpose. It's there to just meet your customers, have a chat with them, get some feedback, etc., isn't it?
Absolutely. My prime purpose is to meet the customers. It's not to make, in all honesty, it's not to make money. No. I want to cover my costs. I'm very happy if I leave a show cost neutral, properly cost neutral, all my costs cover, all the rest of it. I'm not saying I don't want to make money. I'm a business, the only reason Heroics and Ros will survive if as a business, if it makes money, clearly.
Of course.
But the main purpose of a show to me is to meet the people. It's to show them the new products, to show them what we're doing, and to talk to them and get feedback from them. Because it's very easy for someone to write an email and just say, I would like X, I'd like Y. but you'd like to know why do they want X or Y? What are they going to do with it? And also, not everyone really wants to sit down and write an email. But actually, when you start talking to them, you find out much more what they're doing, what they're gaming, what their interests are, where the gaps are, and things like that. And you think, okay, that's something we could look at. And I find it. I can't see any substitute, and that's why I hope the show circuit does survive, because I can't see another way of having that interaction, really. Social media is great, but it's not the same.
No, it absolutely isn't, because there's definitely a buzz about shows when you get a group of fellow people with a common interest. And Joy of Six, and I've spoken about this before, Joy of Six is probably unique because you've got a niche within a niche. Everybody's interested in that scale. Yeah. And the traders there will all be relevant to their interest, whether that's scenery or models. Yeah.
And it's nice to meet everybody. It's nice to chat to them all, and we go up the day before, and it's good. I'm really pleased Peter and the War Games Emporium organised it, and really happy to support it. It's a really nice show. And it's and we're always busy because people know we're going to go there, and they'll pick up stuff, and we try and have something new to show them. And it's you are of course preaching to the converted, because everyone there understands why 6 mil is the best scale, clearly. But
yes, God's own scale.
Oh, of course. And but it's a nice show. I really like it. Yeah.
I mean, some of the other shows, the Midland shows, like Partisan and Hammerhead, which are around the Nottingham area, Newark. They're for me, they're the must-attends for myself, because it's such a central location that you pull people from north, south, east, and west. But I know that they have waiting lists for traders, and whether or not that would be something viable for yourself. But I would say
there certainly are the sort of shows we're looking at possibly to do, but it's all a balancing act. It's also I'd quite like to do if they did it the Bovington show again. Yeah. Purely because we do a lot of tanks.
An obvious hit, isn't it?
I'm really interested in tanks, so it's but also there's a balancing act between how many weekends in all honesty I want to be away and do things. One of the reasons is to be at home sometimes for the children. So it's a balancing act. But I think I would like to do at least one more northern show, for want of a better description, because we've got thousands. There's such a wide range of customers, and you want to show them what you've got. So it's
well, I'm friends with the guy that organises the Bovington show that was resurrected last year. So Stuart Meacham, who's from the Weymouth Levellers, is part of the Peter Pig team that run events around the place. But if you need contact, I'll push your name towards Stuart.
The real worry for me is whether it will be the same day as the Joy of Six. Sometimes it is.
Okay.
1 year we looked at it and it was like, oh no, okay. Well, it's no contest, but I'm.
yeah. That's just that's sod's law, isn't it? That all fall on the same day. Yeah. Okay, so I am fascinated by the industry side of the hobby.
Okay.
I have on a couple of occasions poured some form of metal into a mold, whatever that form is. It's fine. Well, we have lead mountings. We talk about lead mountains.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we have lead piles, don't we? That's
lead
fine.
piles, yeah. You can get cream for that, apparently. But I'm good friends with the people at Peter Pig down in Weymouth, and on occasion when I've ordered figures with them and I've been in Weymouth, they've allowed me to pour my own or cast my own figures. But I am fascinated by it. I've been to the open day at Bacchus as well, so I've seen Peter's manufacturing process. But can you just give us a snapshot of a day in the life of a multinational little tank manufacturer in the Playboy lifestyle that you lead?
Oh, the awesome Playboy lifestyle. Okay. Well, I tell you, when I was doing it all by myself, the awesome play-by-lifestyle was a shed that was so cold in the winter that I used to wear salop hats and a coat. You spend hours. The manufacturing's half the process. The other half is the ordering. The manufacturing. It, what I'm trying to do and what we're trying to do is work a way to get to almost being in ahead. So we're making stock. This is the perennial battle that we always have, in that we never have enough of everything. I mean, there's nearly 3,000 items in the range, and it's like, then someone will order something and you're like, okay, fine, I'll go away and I'll pick the order. So you go see all the bins, and we got literally racks and racks that contain the models in, and you go and you pick the order, and then you come to one bin and it's got, they've ordered 6 and you've got 5, and you're like, okay, fine. That's not on the casting run because the bin wasn't empty, or they've ordered 20 and you think, well, you had a quick look the week before to decide what to cast, and 20 looked to be, what looked in there to be more than enough, but now it isn't, clearly. So that goes on the casting list. And then you have a nice pile of molds, and you turn your pot on and your compressor on, and then you literally just pour the metal into the mold. It makes it very, it makes it sound really simple, but clearly there's different speeds, different pressures, different metals, different, and everything changes with the environment as well. That's, if it's a cold day or a hot day, as the mold heats up, that changes as well. So it's not like I'm a manufacturing. My real training is manufacturing engineering, and I would really like to, spend some serious time looking at the science of casting, but it's never going to happen. And there's so many variables in it. Air pressure, temperature. All these sort of things have an impact on when you pour that metal in. Are you going to open it and find a load of rubbish in there, which means you just put it back in the pot and start again, or a load of lovely castings that you can take out and sell on to the customer? So you can spend hours. Now we've got guys that just do casting. That's what they do. And but you spin, you take them off, they cool down, you break them off. And you put them into the storage pots. So it's then someone goes and they open all the storage pots, put them all in the bags, label up the bags. That someone is mostly me. So that's mostly what I do, is end up picking the orders and printing the address labels off and writing you little notes and shipping them out to you. So the play-by lifestyle, it's not. What I like about it is the products that I'm making and the interest, and it's seeing something new. When Ian sculpts something, I've got some boxes, bits and pieces sitting in front of me that I'm sitting there, and I can't wait to get these put into a mold and see them come out and go, we've gone from nothing to actually a model that is now for sale, and you can buy it, and you can now make your the ones I'm looking at now will be your Polish Marines. So it'll be, you can go away and have some proper vehicles for your Polish Marines. So I like the creation part of it. It's just something else. That's you open that mold up and you've made something. When it's different. You look at molten metal and I know you've seen Terminator and the liquid, and mercury.
Yes.
That's just what it looks like, and it's amazing. And you pour it, it solidifies, and there is something. It's quite a mesmerizing process.
Really, I can imagine it must scratch that creative itch as well as being interested in the engineering and the technical side of molds and speeds that you're spinning. The creative side.
I'd love to say that I am creative. I'm not really creative, as in I couldn't sculpt. I can't make masters. It's just not in me. I'm in awe of the master makers. I really am. They are just something else. But what I'm reasonably good at, I suppose, is saying this is what we need to do. And I find the guys who do the sculpting are artists, and they need a bit of managing, for want of a better word, to actually end up with a range rather than some disconnected models that are all very lovely. But we've got that, but that's great. But where's the 2 other bits? Or we've got a gun and we've got no toe for it. Or you've done one version of it, but there are actually 3. So, and it's like, or we've suddenly, and that's fine. They're all, they'll always make what you ask them to. They don't get me wrong in that regard, but they're artists, and they'll, but you can see some of the love that goes into this. They're clearly, they look at it. I'm looking at it now, and I'm going, this is a lot of the stuff I'm looking at now is still hand sculpted, and it's beautiful. This is hours of work to make it look like it looks. And the figures were that was a joy when I started to get figures that I'd commissioned and said, I want the engineering figures. I know they won't sell as well, the guy digging the hole for the mine, but when I want my army, I want it to be able to have all the bits there, not just, the heavy weapons and the rifles and that sort of stuff. I want some character in the officers. I want them to be doing something if they can. And I think I commissioned Montgomery's caravan, literally I sent him a picture of the Matchbox kit and said, I want that in 6mm. We can have that in 6mm. Please do it for me. And the sculptor sent me back a sculpt of Montgomery with a mug of coffee in his hand, or tea. Well, I'm not sure what he drank, and you're like, yeah, that's brilliant. That's just what I'm trying to create. So you can have a little bit of character in your table as well.
I think even in 28mm, you'd struggle to tell whether it was tea or coffee in the mug.
Yeah, that's true. I'm going for it being a tea because it was a big mug. So that's
right. Yeah, it's got to be tea then, hasn't it? Yeah. That's fascinating. So, how many people have you got involved working with you?
I've shied away from having proper employees, and when I've tried to employ people, they've all said, no, we don't want to. We want to work for you. We don't want to work for you. So everyone is a contractor because that's what they want. And it's sort of like, oh, okay. And part of me is very nervous for this when I initially started. I was like, no, But actually, over the 10 years, it's worked really well because it's given them the freedom that I want from my job, is to work when I want and to do, as long as I'm delivering, that's fine. And so they do the casting for me. They do the sculpting for me of the vehicles, and I've got 3D sculptors doing work for me. They all work for themselves. None of them directly work for me, and that's what they want. But equally, we've got an agreement, that's running year on year. That's what they know what their budget is for the year, and we've kept to it even through coronavirus. Not being able to sell anything, we've still kept paying them to do the work because that's the sort of relationship we have with them, and they're very happy with it because a lot of them say it helps them stay fresh. They're not doing 6mm all the time. They're doing other things, and it's it means they've got a nice break between one scale and another scale. The sculptor has got time to give their eyes a rest, and I'm like, yeah, but surely the buttons on a 28mm figure are the same as ours, and they're like, yeah, but that's different. I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, different, whatever.
yeah. Well, you know what it's like. It's like when they say they can't paint them, I look there and think, well, I look at a 28mm figure and I think, well, if you can paint the detail on that, you can easily paint a 6mm figure, especially when you think it's designed to be played with. It's in most cases it's not a display piece. This is a gaming piece to be used in a game. Or a diorama or a vignette that's telling a story, and they're not really going. They're not normally going to be looking. Don't get me wrong. We want it to look good, but there's I suppose an ethos or a theory behind what you're trying to portray to me with 6mm, and it's different.
There's a trade-off, isn't there? I think that's
well, there has to be. Our models are 1/300 scale, so there's a smaller end of 6mm. To me, I'm not one that really. I hate this. Hate's not the right word. I don't know how wargaming ended up using 6mm, 20mm, 28mm as a scale. It's not. I'm an engineer. 1/300 the scale, 1/285 the scale. 150. 1/50th is a scale. 6mm is just a generic description of figures and vehicles that roughly would go together. Yes. I happily mix all the manufacturers. I probably got the world's broadest collection of 6mm figures in the world.
Okay.
Because I've literally got everything GHQ have ever made, most everything Scotia have ever made, clearly everything Heroics and Ros, Skytrex and Armstrong have got. but I've got one of each. I've got a collect, and I look at them, and that's part of where I came to that. I enjoy all of that, and I'm not sure I'd put different manufacturers' figures of the same vehicle or the same figure next to each other on the same base. That would maybe a little bit pushing it a little bit too far. But overall, mixing them up with the right paint job, I think it's some people say that's rubbish and I'm only ever going to stick with X, Y, or Z. Well, that's fine too. But to me, I remember a customer coming up to me and he said, I've made this American armored division. He said, but you don't do the compressor truck. I'm like, but GHQ do that. And he's like, yeah, but you don't do it. I'm like, it's a compressor truck. It really won't make any difference to, you've built everything else. And he was like, no. He said, it's fine. I'm just letting you know it's a gap in your range. And I'm like, in a nice, thanks. He's a really nice guy, really nice customer and all the rest of it. And you're thinking he taking the approach that I want to make this division and I'm going to buy the bits from wherever I want. And it's brilliant. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I do. It's, and you want the 6 different versions of something and you might find that one manufacturer doesn't do them all. So, enjoy the hobby to me and go to all of them.
Yes, spread the love.
Yes, please. Yeah.
You mentioned COVID there, and obviously we're in highly unusual times at the moment that we're going through. How has that impacted on Heroics and Ros?
Well, just before it all broke out, I shut for a month to sort some family matters out, and I was actually in London at the time, and the rumour was they were going to shut London down. And I was speaking to the wife. She said, "Can you come home?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm coming home now, literally." I said, "I don't know how serious this is. Clearly, it's getting worse. And if anything goes wrong, I do not want to be stuck in London and you stuck with the kids at home." So I came home, and it all became more clear what was going to happen. So okay, right, we opened Heroics and Ros. Well, quite literally, I think I was open for 2 or 3 days, and everyone, everyone clearly decided that they were going to be sitting at home for a long time and they were going to order their stuff. We just got bombarded, and I'm like, no, we can't keep taking orders because I don't know how long this is going to take me to get all this cast, get all this packed up, get all this shipped. It didn't seem right to keep the shop open, so I shut the shop and then we sort of cleared that backlog, and then we started opening a range, but we just got overwhelmed every time, and then the school shut, and the manufacturing facility didn't feel safe working, and I'm like, that's fine. I'm not having anyone doing anything that they're not happy doing. Furlough everyone. So everyone got furloughed, so we couldn't actually make anything. And it's like, okay, what? So we just closed. So we just closed, and mostly shut the shop. A few people have been emailing and need to finish projects. We've got some special projects we work on. We've got a guy that's doing the Battle of Waterloo 1-to-1, and we've got do things for the army and do bits and pieces. So we've been plodding along doing those, but mostly we were just closed because we couldn't manufacture and meet demand. And it was like I didn't want to be in a position where there's no good answer to it. I don't know. I know Pete's opened and closed, and that's. I'm not, and we tried that and it didn't work for us. And because we couldn't really manufacture at any sensible degree, it would be, I just think, well, no, we're just going to sell what we sell. Now we've reopened now and we're gradually adding the ranges. So I don't know when this is going to get broadcast. So hopefully, if it's a week or two, you might find everything back up. But yeah, it hit us very hard, mostly because we couldn't manufacture.
Yeah, probably 7 to 10 days, I would say, before the episode's out. So
then maybe, fingers crossed, we'll have really a bit dependent on what we're doing is we're adding a range back in and leaving it on sale. So and then we're adding once we've cleared any backlog for those orders, we're adding another range in. We're gradually adding those in. The plan is while we've got more casting capacity than we've got orders, we're rebuilding our stock so that as we can add a range back in, we hopefully can meet the majority of the orders from what we hold in stock. We can never, I had someone order 3,000. I put our Welbiter range of figures on the shop, and someone ordered 3,000 paratroopers. Well, I don't have 3,000 paratroopers in stock, so
you don't.
No, surprisingly enough.
That's a
we don't
surprise.
have 3,000 individual paratroopers in stock. To be fair, we try. I mean, I would have normally had maybe 500.
Right.
3,000 is a lot.
Yeah.
In any that's a lot of painting.
Yeah. That's a couple of regiments at least, isn't it? In 1-to-1.
Yes, yeah. I'm not. They are one of the ranges I'm most proud of. It's something that we've redone from the ground up, and I literally have now got my Clark airborne dozer and my paratroop converted carrier, and I think now we can field everything that the paratroops had. Every vehicle, different tows for your 6-pounder and your pulse, and that's the beauty of 6mm. That's what I wanted. That's what I want to do. With it.
So if you look at the website today, or whenever this episode goes live, if an item's showing out of stock, is that because it's just not been released back into the?
That's because it's not been released back into it, and if it's in stock, it is. And if you look in the news section, you should see what ranges have been added back in. But you might, if you're really, really lucky, see a new website. I'm not sure. So it's.
Is this breaking news, Andy?
Well, it may be broken, I suppose, by the time it goes live. But yes, there's a whole new website. One of the things we need more pictures of our product, which I fully understand.
Yeah.
But adding pictures to our old website was very difficult. The web developer is not available anymore, so we couldn't do anything with it. And the web doesn't stand still. And I really wanted it to do more for me, to help me with stock control, to help me with looking at sales, to make it easy for me to add pictures and add news articles to the website and those sort of things. So, you look around at lots of packages, and my desire was to have a website that we could do some work with, because if you have to ask someone else to do it all the time, you're dependent on them when they can do it. So, and with 3,000 products on there and more coming, that's not everything. That it's quite a substantial shop, so you need a proper back end that actually works with it.
Yeah.
So after a lot of looking around, we found one, and they've done a lot of work for us. One of the good things about the shutdown was, I had some time to actually do that. So there's a new website, and hopefully, maybe, just maybe, I want it up before the end of August. So that's the plan. So depending when this goes out, hopefully by the end of August, we will have a new website up there that will have more pictures on than our current one, and the ability for us to add more pictures on. I've just had another 500 pictures delivered. So, these are things that we've been working on, and it's a big job, just to add it sort of seems trivial to add a picture to Facebook, and it is, but actually adding it into a web shop our previous one was a lot more complicated. This one's much easier, and but the picture has to be formatted in the right size and all the rest of it. So we're getting there, and I think if I can get that done, and by the end of the year have a really, really nice website, I'm going to be very pleased with that part of how 2020 went.
Yeah, we've got to take something positive out of this year, haven't we? So a new website would be great, wouldn't it?
It would, for me, it would be. We need to if we want to succeed, we need to move the hobby forward. People have got a choice of where they spend their money and how they spend their money, and I want to make 6mm attractive. To me, you look at some of the games that are put on, and you look at what people do with it, and it's amazing. To me, it's just it, and I want to be able to show that. I want a page where people can send me pictures of the things they've done with it, and we can just quickly put them up there and go, when someone's looking for some inspiration, or how do I do this, or should I get into 6mm? You can go, well, look at that. That's what 6mm really is good at.
Yeah. Okay, I've taken up a bit of your time here, but I've got a couple more things to ask you first, Andy. One is, what's coming up other than the new website? Is there any breaking news or plans for new models or ranges?
Well, I can honestly say that yes, there's huge plans for new models. We've got models that we announced the release of pre-COVID that haven't been released, so they'll be the first ones to come out. I'm in my hot little hands at the moment are some Cold War Polish Czech APCs that I've wanted for ages. So they will hopefully be out. But yet again, we did the whole range. They're OT62, so they're Czech. I sit there and think I want people to be able to do some interesting is not the right word, but some of the, rather than just do the Soviets against the Americans, to be able to do, the Austrians against the Czechs or something like that.
Yeah.
I think there's a great opportunity to do not the right word. My English isn't perhaps as good as an author's, but
we know what you mean, mate.
Hopefully you do know what I mean.
Yeah,
so yes,
yeah.
It's and variety, and I think that's something we can do in 6mm. So there's lots of stuff coming out, and we've got a whole project where I'm looking to redo some of our World War II tanks in uprated 3D generated masters. So that's, if that all comes to fruition, touching wood on at the moment, then you may by Christmas see some very new Panzer IVs and Shermans out there. So
because I know that there's been some resculpting of the infantry, hasn't there, over the years?
Yeah, that's an ongoing project. Basically, I struggled to find anyone that could imitate Roger's style of infantry. It's so small, and it was of a style of its time. I personally, I quite like it, and I think it's But customers there also seems to be, we'd like them a little bit bigger with a little bit, more detail, for want of a better word. And I'm like, well, okay. At the end of the day, we are a business. It's not and so we started off doing some winter troops, because winter troops by definition are a bit bulkier than summer troops, just by the uniforms they're wearing and all the rest of it. And we started the sculpture off there, and as we've just been gradually releasing more and more stuff, we seem to have hit the right place with our Cold War and World War II troops, because they're just, as I say, we did them with the intention of doing everything. In the Soviets, in the Soviet summer range, I think there's 62 figures, individual sculpts for a 6mm range.
Yeah.
So, that equates. That's a crazy amount of figures. But you can have your mind dog, you can have your mind detector, you can have your medics, you can have all these sort of things that you want. They are either out now or will be out very, very shortly. That's what we've been working on. We did the Cold War figures because I wanted some more. I wanted to have, there were bits missing from the Cold War infantry as far as I was concerned, and I wanted more in there. And we started to add them. And as they sold, people were like, well, you've got loads of Swedish tanks, but you don't have any Swedish infantry. So you do some research and go, well, okay, they did have a slightly different, helmet and bits and pieces, and they did have some different, weapons. And especially as you get into the Cold War, there's a lot more support weapons and things. It's like, okay, we'll do it. Let's see how it sells. It sells. Well, what about the Danes? So we've done some Danes. We've done the French. I've commissioned some Austrians. Canadians, Dutch. And you sit there and then you start thinking, well, actually, you're starting to get to the limit. But then someone says, well, what about Australians or Singaporeans? And then you start to look at it and go, okay, well, maybe we can do something there. And that's the new figures are selling very well. Yeah, people like the new figures. And then we did the same with World War II. Gradually, but we've kept the old ones. Some people are fans of the old ones, and some people are fans of the new ones. And some people use both. And I thought, well, I actually don't want to discontinue the old ones. They're lovely figures. They work perfectly well. If people want those, we'll continue to sell them. So we sell them, side by side. So
they fight just as well on the tabletop.
They fight just as well on the table. And if you've got 90% of your army done, you really don't want to redo it. You might want to do a new army. So it's like, okay, well, you can finish that bit off there and do those. And but the main thing was we used to get hundreds of requests to, can I have more mortars, or can I have more heavy machine guns, or can I have whatever it might be. The way the molds have been made, and our figure packs were, the mold equals a figure pack, and you spin it, you make packs. If you start taking strips out of those packs, it causes a problem, because, you know, if everyone picked different strips, that would be fine. But if they all pick the same strip, you end up with a load of strips of the other type strip, which then means the molds become more expensive to spin because they're only like 50% efficient. So,
Yeah.
You know, and then you think, well, actually, can I charge you, you know, £2 for that strip? Well, no, you wouldn't buy it. So it sort of all became a bit of a, I wasn't sure what to do. And then I thought, well, actually, if we redesign the range, we can do it again. We can put the weapons on individual strips. So if you want 5 mine detectors, you can have 5 mine detectors. You want some snipers, you can have some snipers. You want some observers, have some observers. We can sell them by the strip. You can have then not exactly what you want, because you've got to buy 5, but within reason, you know, you can have what you want then. And that seems to have done very well, because, you know, depending on your rule set, you may want, you know, maybe very significant what weapons the troops are armed with, or it might not be significant at all. So, you know, so yeah, that was that. It makes the range more expensive initially, but if you sell more, that's worth it. And also, I'm happier with it. You know, I look at it and think, well, if I wanted to do the 21st Panzer, I want to be able to make it up with the right support weapons and do it the right way.
And that's, I think that's great, because you're responding to that customer service and request there, where people might want different makeups of heavy weapons or whatever it is, and rather than having to buy 2 packs and only using 20% of that pack to fill the need, then you're responding to that customer needs. I think that's fantastic.
Well, that was it. It's like, you know, your RPG-7, your classic, you know, anti-tank weapon, and I think you got 5 in our infantry pack, and you think, well, how many do you want? And now we have a strip of 5, and you can buy as many as you want, and you know, we sell lots.
Yeah.
So clearly people wanted lots. So.
Yeah, that's good. Right, Andy. To round out every interview, and I'm going to ramble a little bit. Do you know what's coming?
I do, but I'm cheating.
Mate, cheat away. There's no hard and fast rule. So it's your addition to the Godzone Scale virtual library. I'm going to ask you to recommend a book to the listeners. So
well,
if you've
I'm
got
going to
anything
recommend
ready.
3 books.
3? There's room on the shelf, mate. Don't worry.
Two you'd struggle to find, and one's a real recommendation.
Okay, mate.
One is the story of the 79th Armoured Division in World War II, because that's what my father was in, and that spurred my interest from you know, for the military, all things military, and this is where it all came from.
Yeah. And
also it's a really interesting read. It was written very shortly afterwards. It's got loads of pictures, and it's sort of, I suppose, for me personally, it reminds me of my dad. So it has a very sentimental book for me. The other is a Marks and Spencer's Great Land Battles book. It's probably 40 years old, and you'll never get it. It's by Richard Hubble, and it's got lovely Osprey drawings in there of battle tactics and all the rest of it. And I remember getting it as a Christmas present, and I've still got it now. And it just, I suppose, reinforced my interest in that, you know, it isn't just 2 sides banging straight up against each other, because if it was, the side with the most would always win, and they don't. Yes. So there is a lot more to it. It's, you know, it's how you use it and what you do with it. So those are my 2 frivolous ones, for want of a better reason. But the book that I would recommend, if you have any interest in Normandy and all that sort of things, is A Combat History of the 21st Panzer Division, written by Werner Kortenzhaus, I think, but my German, published by Hellion. And it, I for some, you know, my dad was in Normandy, and that area of the war always interested me, and the 21st always interested me because they were strange. All the kit was weird, you know, and the whole, if they'd done things slightly differently, you know, would the V-Day failed? And for me, the world would be a very, very different place if it had, you know. I mean, you can say that about, you know, so many different battles, but that was the only one my father was at, so it always has had a special feeling in my head, and that was my recommendation. It's a brilliant book. It just has got so many information, so many, you know, interesting pictures, and it really is just a story of the Battle of Normandy, from, I suppose, almost from a German point of view, which is unusual. So yes, that's my recommendation.
Oh, fantastic! That will take pride of place. And I've been a bit negligent in previous episodes. What I will do is put a link up. I'll find the link for it in Amazon, and we'll put a link up into the show notes. Andy, I hope the experience of your first ever podcast interview hasn't been too bad, that you haven't been too intimidated. You've certainly given me some great content there. So thanks.
As long as it's okay
for your time,
for you,
mate.
it's not a problem. It's a wonderful hobby, and I just hope everyone enjoys it. To me, this is what it's all about. It's to give people enjoyment.
Yeah.
We get letters from customers all over the world. I've got one from a guy who's got cancer. And he's made a Legion 1-to-1, and we've been sending it out, month by month. And he's taken so much joy from that, and I've taken so much joy from seeing the pictures of it. This hobby gives so much fun, and it's so beneficial to everyone. Just enjoy it and have fun with it.
Mate, I can't top that. That is so true. Andy, thanks so much for your time. I hope, and I do insist that anybody who comes on commits to coming back onto the show at some point in the future.
If
So
you can stand having me back, I'll happily be back, sure.
Yeah, well, maybe once that new website's up and running and COVID's a thing of the past, and we can talk about happier times ahead. So
sounds like a plan.
Take me back to dear old Liming, what's beyond the great one undertown? Take me over there, drop me anywhere, Liverpool East or Birmingham, but I don't care.
Okay, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that chat with Andy. What a fascinating insight into the industry and the life of a 6mm figure manufacturer. Okay, I'm going to close out the show, but before I do so, I'm going to talk about something that I didn't think I would resort to, but I'll explain the reasons why. I'm going to talk about Patreon. Now, it's something I've considered for some time, and in fact, I set up a Patreon account for God's Own Scale podcast probably not long after I came back onto the airwaves. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One is that the costs of running this podcast, whilst not onerous, do take up some of my hobby finances, which I've been willing to and will continue to be willing to fund myself. However, any contribution towards those running costs would be gratefully appreciated. And secondly, my setup is pretty amateurish compared to most podcasts that I listen to. The sound quality, certainly on the pre-ramble and post-ramble bits, I'm aware the sound quality isn't always great, and I would love to be able to invest in a proper microphone rather than relying on a headset with a microphone that is probably getting on for 10 years old. Now, the cost of those, again, isn't prohibitive, and I may well end up purchasing one anyway, but if there was some assistance through the listenership, and really only a very small percentage of the people that listen to the podcast, if they contributed a small amount each, then I would easily cover those costs. And also, as I mentioned at the start of the show, I would like to next year do some roving reporting, and I've tried this before using the microphone on my mobile telephone, which isn't great. So if I could maybe purchase a mobile microphone with recorder in, that would be great and would benefit the podcast immensely. Now, before I tell you how to go about supporting the podcast through Patreon, I will urge you, if you are of limited funds and choose to support content producers already through Patreon, I would say do not stop supporting whoever it is to support the God's Own Scale podcast. The existence of the podcast does not depend on Patreon. Also, I know that Little Wars TV are looking to go down the Patreon route to support their own production of the high quality videos that they release through their YouTube channel. And if it was a toss up between Little Wars TV and God's Own Scale, I would much prefer that you sent that money towards Little Wars TV first rather than myself. As I say, the existence of this podcast does not depend on Patreon. However, if there was a small portion of you out there who were willing to assist in the running of the podcast, it would be absolutely appreciated. So, should you wish to do that, there will be a link on my Twitter feed and on the blog, which hasn't seen a lot of activity lately, but hopefully I shall pick up the content there. But also you can look at www.patreon.com/God's Own Scale, and that will take you through to the Patreon site where you could contribute. Also, if there's anybody out there in the industry, producers, manufacturers, of whatever it is that has a relevance to God's Own Scale, if you'd be interested in sponsoring the show or supporting the show in any way, please get in touch through Twitter at God's Own Scale or email at godsownscale@gmail.com. And I will finally stress one more time, the existence of this podcast does not depend on either sponsorship or Patreon. The podcast will continue, and I will at some point upgrade the microphones that I use for the podcast, and hopefully when shows return next year I will invest in some mobile recording facility to hopefully get some interviews whilst out and about at shows. So just something for you to think about if you are of that way minded to support a podcast, then it would be most appreciated. You may have noticed that I've started a small YouTube channel. That is, if you think this podcast is amateurish, then the YouTube channel is a step below that, but it's really just a place for me to ramble occasionally, show off some painting techniques and do one or two unboxings, rather than do hobby updates on the podcast, which I think probably are the least interesting part of any podcast, when a host talks about their own hobby activities. If you can see what's going on, I think that's probably the better medium to get that across. So have a look at God's Own Scale TV on YouTube. Again, there'll be a link in the show notes for this, along with the Patreon address. And take a look and see what I'm up to in the hobby. Also, you will notice that episodes from this podcast are appearing on YouTube just as a different means of accessing the podcast or listening to it. So check that out on there. Okay, I'm going to round out the show. Thank Andy Kirk once more for giving up his time to talk to me on the podcast. There's lots more to come. The next few weeks are going to be pretty exciting with guests who are lined up. So please stick with me. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate the comments and the feedback that I get for the podcast and the support that I see across Facebook and Twitter and through the emails that I receive. It's greatly appreciated, and it certainly spurs me on to continue with the podcast and producing the content that hopefully you enjoy listening to. So, without further ado, I'll say goodbye. Thank you for listening, and of course, keep talking about 6.
Brother Bertie went away to do his bit the other day, with a smile on his lips and his lieutenant pips upon his shoulder, bright and gay. As the train moved out, he said, "Remember me to all the birds." Then he wagged his paw and went away to war, shouting out these pathetic words: "Goodbye, goodbye, wipe a dear baby dear from your eye. Though it's hard to part, I know, I'll be tickled to death to go. Don't cry, don't sigh, there's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir, all things, cheerio, chin chin, na boo, toodaloo, goodbye." At the concert down at Kew, some convalescents dressed in blue had to hear Lady Lee, who had turned 83, sing all the old songs she knew. Then she made a speech and said, "I look upon you boys with pride, and for what you've done I'm going to kiss each one." Then they all grabbed their sticks and cried, "Goodbye, goodbye, where's the dear baby dear from your eye? Though it's hard to part, I know, I'll be tickled to death to go. Don't cry, don't sigh, there's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir, all things, cheerio, chin chin, na boo, toodaloo, goodbye." Little Private Patrick saw he was the prisoner of war, till the Hun with the gun called him pig dog for fun, then Paddy punched him on the door. Right across the barbed wire fence the German dropped, then dear, oh dear, all the wire gave away and Paddy yelled hooray as he ran for the Dutch frontier. Goodbye, goodbye, wipe a dear baby dear from your eye. Though it's hard to part, I know, I'll be tickled to death to go. Don't cry, don't sigh, there's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir.